There's so many distractions in the world, and it's hard. It's hard to make that leap and say, I don't want my phone on Shabbat. Like, I'm not flicking on the lights on Shabbat. But once you go all in, Israel's the place to go all in because it's magical here, obviously. And once you go all in, you're going to see that you can't live and be successful the other 6 days of the week to your fullest extent without that day of Shabbat and plugging into yourself and plugging into Torah. So we want to give them as many opportunities to feel that while they're here as possible. And hopefully that will carry on with them after they're here.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Be'in podcast. Today, I spent a little bit of time with Rabbi and Rebbetzin Menaged from Israel XP. Rabbi and Rebbetzin Menaged have an awesome story themselves of how they became from, and also how they ended up getting their way to Eretz Yisrael to become the directors of Israel XP. We also spoke about different things related to anti-Semitism on college campuses and a lot of things related to what their students go through in Israel and post-Israel. So without further ado, I'm super excited for you guys to listen to this episode. But before we get to that, one last thing. I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video that you'll hear in the middle of this episode, which is Noble Custom Suits. Looking forward to seeing you guys soon, and enjoy this episode with Rabbi and Rebbetzin Menaged. Welcome to the Israel Gap Year Be'in podcast. I'm your host, Avi Proctor, and in each episode we get Be'in in depth into the remarkable lives of individuals in Israel who dedicate themselves to inspiring the next generation of Klal Yisrael. So, Rabbi Rebbetzin Menaged, thank you so much for joining me today and coming all the way 4 minutes to Neve Shamir. I know this one, I think we've been working on this one for about a month and a half, 2 months, and just thank you for taking the time.
Pleasure.
Awesome to be here.
Thank you. So, we're sitting here right now after years and years of experience that you guys had within the yeshiva and seminary world, Kirv in America, and just chinuch as a whole. And I know we were actually speaking about this before, yesterday. You guys have a very interesting story. How you met, how you became from, and whatnot. So kind of take me through the background, however much you guys want to talk about, just really how did we get here today and kind of go from there.
Awesome. Okay. So I grew up in South Florida. I grew up in Miami, and I grew up actually going from PK4 to Hillel. Today it's called Shek Hillel, and it's community day school, modern Orthodox leaning. Although I would say the average student there was not Shomer Halacha growing up at all, but very traditional community. So it's like a funny kind of place where everyone is kind of part of the Orthodox community, growing up that way, understanding that way, praying in shuls that are similar in that style, learning Torah. But when it comes to Halacha, not necessarily actually keeping it. But you have these rabbis that were unbelievable, that wanted to teach, that wanted to educate, that wanted to chinuch, kiruv, make everything much stronger. And so I'd say growing up, I'm in a community where halacha is like kind of on the side a little bit, but Zionism, Torah, Hashem is actually a big part of how we were being educated. And then slowly, start asking questions. And as you start getting older, and rabbis were awesome. The answers were awesome. The Torah was awesome. I'd also say that the love that the rabbis showed over there, and that was one of the first times already when I was in high school, where you had yourself rabbis who'd say, come for Shabbat, let's sit, let's learn, let's talk. And was very, very special. And I say these rabbis that I had have been with me my whole life till now. And that was really special. So I say that was the start of the journey growing up down there. But again, you have to understand, this is the 90s, early 2000s in South Florida. The community wasn't there yet. Today, you actually seen the results. It's unbelievable to watch the change that happened growing up there in South Florida. But, we grew up like going to regular co-ed high schools, but then this Jewish component was always very powerful in the background. And then I would say getting to University of Florida, because when I was going to high school, there wasn't a program out there saying, come to Israel. They weren't promoting it yet. I mean, I think it might have been too scary for the parents. It might have been, they're like, yeah, Hashem is great, Torah is great, but Israel, that wasn't the big push. Spend your gap year. And it wasn't even on my mind whatsoever. What was on my mind? You got to go to college. You got to start your degree. You have to have this big plan. I mean, the guidance counselors, you have to have a plan and a plan and a plan. And then where does Judaism fit into that plan? Was an interesting question along the way. And then I'd say the next step of growth was at University of Florida, where I met my wife, and maybe we'll catch you up to me. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, which is 5 hours north of Miami. For people that don't know, very small Jewish community. I grew up as a conservative Jew, very proud, very Zionistic, went to Camp Ramah, but really living in a very small Jewish community, going to public school, and Jewish leadership and identity was always really important to me. But there wasn't like a big infrastructure for it. And I would say by the time I got to university, I was pretty far away from it. And I had encountered some sort of, I don't know if it was overt anti-Semitism growing up, but just that feeling that you're really a big minority. And when I got to university, it was actually the beginning of the second Intifada here in Israel. And along with all of the terror attacks and suicide bombings going on over here, there was a big increase in anti-Israel and anti-Semitic propaganda on U.S. college campuses. And I was involved with student government, and I kind of got caught up in the middle of it. And I found myself responsible for the pro-Israel movement at the University of Florida. And I actually came to Israel on an Aish Torah trip to learn Israel advocacy. This was in the winter of 2001, which is, right on the heels of September 11th. Everything in Israel was closed down. Birthright wasn't running. Ben Yehuda Street was closed down. We really felt when we came to be taught about Israel from a history and from a strategic affairs perspective that if we didn't go back and explain what was going on, nobody else would. And you didn't have social media, you just had the New York Times, and that was the whole story. So we felt a big responsibility. And because that trip was run by Aish Torah, it was also my first real exposure to an authentic Judaism, a Shomer Shabbat experience in the Old City, a chance to really ask a lot of questions that I wouldn't say I bought all the answers to at the time, but definitely got the wheels in my head turning, that it wasn't just about standing up for Israel, but that maybe that was a piece of a larger question about my Jewish identity. And the authenticity here is incredible, especially for someone coming from a smaller Jewish community. Just the feeling that you can walk down the street and all the different pieces of yourself as an individual and as a collective just reconcile. And life as a Jew is so natural here is really empowering. And it really changes the paradigm of what it is to be a Jew and human being, just being here in Israel.
Wow. So, I mean, going through that process of everything you went through, kind of, as you've alluded to before, take me through that stage of when you guys met each other and, how do you get to living in Ramat Beit Shemesh Gimel?
So we were both at the University of Florida, and we had a political science class together, and I was leading this Israel advocacy movement, and I saw that Eli was pretty good at sticking up for Israel to the professor. So I recruited him into...
The class was actually called Politics of Israel. That was
it was a Politics of Israel class, and he was pretty good at saying what needed to be said to the professor. So I recruited him into this club, and the deal was that he had come to the University of Florida already stronger in his Jewish identity, but realizing that there were a lot of people who didn't know so much about their Jewish identities on campus. And he approached the Chabad rabbi about there being more Torah classes. And the Chabad rabbi said, "Why don't you teach one?" So he had started teaching like a Pirkei Avot Chabura just in somebody's apartment.
So actually, I want to take a step back for that, because I do have to say that, again, we were going to speak about Jewish leadership a little bit and about how you have to step it up. I want to credit a lot of that, at least in my personal growth, to the rabbi at the University of Florida. There's Rabbi Beryl Goldman there. He runs an operation that he's planning this year for his Pesach Seder. He's renting out the O-Dome, which is like the main basketball arena over there, and he's going to be doing 1,200 students he's expecting there for the Seder. He's doing big time stuff. When we were there, when it was just beginning, it was about 100 people coming out.
Not even. We first met him. He was living in an apartment, and he had one baby, a wife and one baby, and they were doing meals of a few dozen people in their apartment. And we've watched them over the last 20 years grow to this operation of 1,200 people for Seder, huge Chabad house, making Gainesville actually a place where a student can have kosher food, can live with Shomer Shabbat roommates, and have a fun, engaging time with their identity. So I know that example, Beryl and Khan.
Right. So he was a big example also, because first off, he thought to do things big. If you're doing something, you got to do it big. You got to, really give the students the most up-to-date, state-of-the-art, but authentic Jewish experience at the same time. So that was really big. And the other thing about him was he loved every single student. He really was. And this is something that the rabbis that have connected along the way, whether it was back from high school, whether it was in university, he even knows now when we come back and visit him, he knows that I have one daughter that only likes plain pasta, and he's going to make a special thing on the side for her, because he has that in his mind as he's making dinner for 300 people. So, and he's constantly, and I'm not, and every student is like that in his mind. What can I do? What particular detail can I remember about them that I can actually show them love in the future and actually care about them? So that was big. But then I went to him and I'm like, okay, Rabbi, we need more Torah here. We're growing, we're getting bigger here, and we need some more Torah. And the rabbi said to me, he goes, okay, you're right. And he actually made a charuta with me. We had a one-on-one where we learned together. But then, and we learned on the phone, we learned any possible. It was before Zoom, but we learned any way possible. We made we made sure to find our time. But we need a little bit more. So he said to me, you're right. I think you got to go teach. So I'm like 19 years old, and I'm like, okay, what am I going to teach? He's like, you got to teach. He says, teach Pirkei Avot, teach ethics. Okay, 19-year-old teaching ethics. What am I going to do? So I called back my rabbis from high school, and here was beautiful because in Hillel, Miami, in those days, they had different kind of rabbis. You had your modern Orthodox rabbis, you had your Chabad rabbi, you had your Litvak rabbi, you had your yeshivish rabbis, and they were all in one place, which was beautiful because I was trying to figure out my personal identity. Because growing up at home, we didn't have like a Torah identity. We had a Jewish identity, a traditional identity. But it wasn't like, oh, we have this hashkafa and that hashkafa. And then I'm in a high school where I'm actually being exposed to many. So I had one particular rabbi that I love, which is named Rabbi Parsons. He was unbelievable. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Zweig. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Zweig from the yeshiva down in Miami Beach, which is the biggest yeshiva in it still is down in South Florida. And if anybody knows Rabbi Zweig's story, he's a big, deep thinker, a lot of psychology. And he's like, oh, I have tapes for you. Take these Pirkei Avot tapes and learn it and then teach it. So what I would remember doing is we'd do a class once a week, just open it up to any students at the University of Florida. We try to recruit them in the middle of like the square, this Turlington Plaza, the main square of University of Florida. Oh, you're Jewish? Like a rabbi trying to put tefillin on people. I'm like, oh, you want to come learn some Torah? And I listened to the tapes like, the week before, actually a lot of times last minute, I'd be like sitting in my little apartment and listening to these and taking notes and learning major deep hashkafa. And so we started teaching.
Wow.
So we made a deal that he would come to my Israel club if I would go to his Pirkei Avot shirim, and that's how we became friends. And
Wow.
And that was a big turning point for me, sort of like a synthesis of what I had sort of started to know on a bigger level about my Jewish identity, and now an opportunity to really learn and grow. And yeah, long story short, we got married about 2 years later. And we wound up coming to Israel. We hadn't had a chance to learn a formal yeshiva or seminary environment, except for on, some summer trips. And we had both been accepted into grad school. Eli was going to go to law school. I was going to go for a PhD in comparative politics, both in New York. We got married in December, and we had been planning to be back in time for September. We got to Israel. We did our Shavar Brachot on the plane. We lived in a tiny bedroom and a tiny one room in Nachlaot.
Wow.
And after a few months, we said, hey, like the world has a lot of Jewish lawyers, but there's not as many people that are on fire for the Jewish people. And like, let's do this. Let's try to be all in.
Yeah, but actually, it was the first of that time in Eretz Yisrael, where all you getting married out there. It's really very, very special to sit and come and learn Torah. I remember I actually picked in the end to learn Midrash Sfaradi, which is in the old cities in Israeli yeshivas. Everything was in Hebrew, which also was a really big deal. Again, talking about exposure to cultures and different types. Now I'm with Israelis learning in Hebrew, and there's one real way to kick it up a notch. So it was really special. Also being in the old city, really special.
And I learned at She'arim in Har Nof, which is a fantastic place run by Rebbetzin Pavlov, who I'm still very close to my Rebbetzins from that time. Amazing role models. One thing also that we noticed is that I married a Sephardi. I needed to know Sephardi halacha.
You're Ashkenaz, though.
Yeah, I'm Ashkenaz, but and also I didn't have such a strong halachic knowledge growing up, and so I was learning halacha and
cooking.
Thank you.
Yeah, halachas of Shabbos, halachas of cooking, things like that. And I need to know Sephardi halacha. And at the time, a lot of the seminaries and yeshivas, I couldn't find a program unless I was going to go into like a super Sephardi Israeli type of midrasha where I could really learn Sephardi halacha and build my home appropriately. And I give a lot of credit to She'arim because I went to Rebbetzin Pavlov with this, and she said, well, find me a Sephardi halacha teacher. So I actually brought in Eli's Rabbi Chaim Levy, who was teaching at Aish at the time, to start teaching a Sephardi halacha program at She'arim. And that was the first one I know of its kind of a Sephardi halacha program taught in an otherwise Ashkenazi school. He teaches now all over and started a lot of programs. And I think for us, that was a big point where we saw that there are many people that are growing, but we're seeking to grow in a framework that was a natural continuation of what they had been brought up with, and also would be a launching point that when they went back to their communities, let's say that their growth trajectory would continue to be healthy and inclusive. And I really think that was for us something that we said we want to be a part of, and we want to help build something like that.
Right. And then I got to give kavod to my wife because she said it in a nice way. Oh, we decided there'd be too many Jewish lawyers out there. But that's actually we had a big walk. I'll never forget. We were walking back. I finished Kollel that night, and we were like only married for 4 or 5 months, and we were really into it. And I'm like, okay, do we really want to do this? Let's give up those, those dreams that we had in the secular world from high school, and for that to actually pick Hashem, pick Torah, do something a little bigger. And Natalie's like, yeah, we actually got to do this. We got to do this. And that changed the trajectory. And after that, we're going to eventually move back to America for a bit. We had a little temporary time in Kollel when I was in Brooklyn. And this whole time Natalie's working and supporting me while I can learn Torah. So I have to say, Baruch Hashem, that was really, really, really big deal. And it really is your zechut.
Right.
But
so we wound up in Kollel for about 7 years, the first 2 years in Yerushalayim, and then another 5 years in Brooklyn in the Syrian community. And I was working and, I was learning. And that was a really important time in terms of building our home and our priorities and setting up what we wanted our hashkafa to be.
Right. And at the same time, I would say that we always spend our time dealing with college students, meaning when we were in college, so we were the college students who slowly were building ourselves up to be leaders on campus. Actually, Natalie also was the head of the pro-Israel group on campus, which in those days politically was a very big deal at a campus of University of Florida. And we would always stay in contact with that part of our life. And then Natalie, with your job as well, that just kept us with college students. So.
Right. So for the 5 years that we were in Kollel in Brooklyn, I actually ran that branch of Aisha Torah, doing Israel advocacy, flying around to college campuses around America, helping students that were facing similar challenges, running trips back here to Israel during the winter and summer breaks for them. So even though we were in this very Torah-oriented phase of our lives and really living for the Torah, we also still had a bit of a connection to what the challenges were facing people that had been in the position we had been in not many years prior.
Right. I can't help but think, by the way, when you tell me all this that you went through, what in the world did your parents say about it? So like you went from like going to University of Florida and now you're like, oh, I don't want to be a lawyer. I'm going to go learn. You know what I'm saying? Like what happened there?
I want to credit, first I want to credit both our sets of parents. But I want to credit Rebbetzin Pavlovich Sharim that gave me some really good advice about taking any kinds of bumps in the roads that happened during my growth period and channeling them into Hakarat HaTov. And recognizing that every piece that I had been raised with, every experience I had, every value I saw from my parents were stepping stones that were building me to where I was. And that it was extremely important to communicate that back to my parents at all times. I can't say I always did so perfectly, but, my parents have been tremendously supportive, even when it was surprising and not easy for them.
Wow.
And they've really been super involved in our lives and super respectful of the priorities that we have. And I can't thank them enough. And it's even been incredible to watch, especially in like the last few years. My parents grow a lot. And my sisters and their families have also just always been really amazing and supportive of us.
So no, I would say, I think for my parents at first, it was a little bit of like, oh my God, I can go to law school right now. And I think for them, part of them ingraining in me, because they were a little more of the older generation post-war. And it was very much, you have to get a job, you have to make a good parnassa. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to Kollel now for a while, which was a total foreign idea to them. At the same time, they were still very, very, very pro-Jewish and for that. But like, how do you have that? Like, the beginning years, I say, was a little bit more difficult. Although, as we started having kids and as they're becoming grandparents and being with their kids, it was really awesome. And my father actually had me at a much older age. So I did take on a side job as being a rabbi of a shul in Brooklyn. So it was actually a fun shul. It was Syrians, I know from Damascus, known as boats. They had just came to America in the 90s. The other half of the shul were Israelis, post-army, come to America, early 20s. It was a really beautiful, growth-oriented shul. I was really young. It was like 26 years old. Thankfully, in Brooklyn, if you're a rabbi of a shul, there's dozens and dozens of other rabbis who could be dealing with the more halachic and higher level things. But from a perspective of teaching Torah, inspiring, it was an awesome experience. And also, I think from my parents' perspective, oh, now you actually have a job. Okay, that already is a job, and you're already doing something. So.
I would say, though, we know that we are fortunate to have our college degrees to fall back on. And I think that helped us in retrospect understand now running a college program, why that's a priority for a lot of students, why that's a priority for a lot of their parents. And let's try to work on an individual path that's going to help you integrate all those different pieces and priorities of your life together.
First of all, it's the fact that you ran a show when you were 26 years old and had all those programming, really kol hakavod. I want to touch on a little bit what you said a second ago, that you guys had a degree to fall back on, right? And that helped you in terms of running a program right now. So how in the world did you guys become the directors of Israel XP? I know you mentioned to me yesterday that was kind of what helped you guys come back here to Eretz Israel and establish yourself here. So kind of take me through that process of how you got to that.
So we had at the time our oldest daughters were 4 and 2 years old. And we did have a dream always to get back to Israel. But we had gotten a little comfortable in America too. And we felt that if we were going to come, we wanted to do it when our children were still young enough to really get their education and get their cultural identity from being here in Israel. And we got the opportunity to come. At the time, we committed for a year to come be an Av and Bayit in a program that Bar Ilan's had a program really for many years for students that want to come study from abroad. But really, Israel XP was a newer program, only in its second year. And we got the opportunity to come be an Av and Bayit, try it out, see if we felt like we could really make it living in Israel, make it living in a dorm and working with students. And we took a leap of faith and we got on the plane. We made Aliyah, Nefesh B'Nefesh. And that was the summer of 2011.
Wow.
We got to the dorms. Our apartment wasn't ready yet.
Well, you lived in the dormitory.
In the dorms.
How did you pull that off?
It was awesome. Get a little students, like a big friend house. But
we invested in a place in Ramat Beit Shemesh that wasn't ready yet. So we went up for 3 years living in the dorms.
Yeah. But yeah, when the opportunity came up, we got offered the job to come live in the dorms and be the Av and Bayit. It was a scary concept. Like, here we are, we're going to move across the world to try something out. Can we really hang out with 18-year-olds and do it? But we did also feel that our background really had come from there, and that the concept of these students who want to learn Torah, but they also want to be at a university program, and we felt it was a special time to like and to be in Eretz Yisrael. So we jumped on it. It was scary. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem.
So, going from Av and Bayit to, now being, the directors of Israel XP, we were speaking about this before we got on air. I ran into you when you were doing recruiting last year, and you leave your family for a bunch of weeks throughout the year, and you have all these students across the U.S. and in other parts outside of the U.S. that are in high school, and they're like, do I go to secular college? Do I go to Yeshiva University, wherever it may be? Or do I skip my gap year? Or do I go to gap year or whatnot? And they have all these different thoughts, and they don't necessarily know what they want to do. And for you guys, I'm sure you're in a different, unique situation than most people within the yeshiva and seminary world, that like a lot of the people that are considering your program will probably actually not go to Israel if they don't go to your program. So what is call it your pitch, essentially, when you have to go to these high schools in America, speak to all these students, and I'm sure you have it where like, Rabbi, I don't need to go for my gap year in Israel. I don't need to do this. What is that process for you? And kind of like, how do you get students to come?
Right. Right. So we think that a student shouldn't necessarily have to choose between going to college and going to Israel. We want to offer an opportunity to do both and to really get that freshman year experience and the credits and get started on that path during a year in Israel. That can really be a place where, in an environment where they can grow spiritually and connect to the land of Israel and hone their Jewish leadership. And that's really what we aim to do, sort of all in one.
I want to add that I actually think there are so many students out there where, like exactly as you said, they're like, oh, I can't go do my gap year in Israel because I have to start college for whatever reason, whether it's their parents, whether it's their high schools. And I'm talking even coming from the Jewish high schools, there's this like pressure that I have to make it in life. I have to already start my career, I have to go in there. So the idea by us is, okay, so you have to start your college career. So let's start it. Why don't we do it in Israel? Let's go destination college in our Jewish homeland. And we'll give you your college experience, but also we'll give you your gap year experience at the same time. So you get the best of both worlds.
Right. And just to clarify, the classes that the students take during their year by us are fully transferable to many American universities. So they get their basic secular classes out of the way for that freshman year. And we do Torah classes every morning, many of which are also transferable. So the idea is that they're not held back academically. And really, I think that, there's a lot of things that happen during a freshman year or can happen during a freshman year. And for those to happen in Israel, where you have warm staff that wants to be role models and wants to make sure you're doing well in an environment where we can inculcate important values. So, you want to kind of get that freshman year experience out of the way in a place that's supportive and growth oriented.
Right.
So there's a couple of elements that we're seeking to balance together. We have the university experience. Bar Ilan's a world-class university located outside Tel Aviv. Over 20,000 students go there. Our program is about 120 to 130 students. Everything's in English. We have private dorm site, which I'll talk about in a minute, and all of our classes are just for our students. So you get the experience of going to a big, exciting university campus, but in reality, you're in small classes where the staff knows you and you have a supportive environment. So I think it's the best of both worlds and a good transition to the university experience like that. And obviously that the credits transfer wherever you're going next, hopefully. The second piece, which is just as important to us, is Jewish growth. We say that Jewish growth should be at your own pace, as long as you have some sort of pace. We have Torah classes every morning, 4 mornings a week. Plus, we do everything in the traditional style of Shomer Shabbat, Shomer Kashrut program. And there's a lot of magic, I think, that happens on the informal side in terms of Shabbat and optional learning and just more opportunities to grow and be inspired Jewishly. So I just want to talk about our staff for a minute.
Sure.
You might call it informal education. We call it being all in. All in. We have an incredible staff, many of which who have been with XP for years now, and many of which are not just one member of the family working on the program, but the other spouse and really all the children who say, we want to be with the students every step of the way during their journey this year, be accessible for them anytime they want to experience, learn anything. And our staff is super committed to that.
Right. So we have 5 families that are really all in. This is 24/7. And we actually include 7 here because when it comes to Shabbat, we're hosting students every week. Meaning if you're in the dorms, we have 2 families that lived in the dorms with us, they're hosting at their house 20, 25 students. Later, Oneg, there are people coming in over there. The off-campus families are hosting every Shabbat, 10, 12 students. And we really with them all the time.
So there's 2 families that live full-time in the dorms, both for many years now. They're completely committed. Their kids are part of the program. Their homes are always open, not just, first of all, for chicken soup or whatever the doctor, whatever you need, but also, come in our house a few nights a week and have wings with us or have soup with us and learn some wisdom from us. Our homes are open on Shabbat. Ask our kids anything that you want as they're bicycling around the front yard, and just see what it is to have a Jewish family and a Jewish life. And then there's a third family that also lives off of campus and runs all of our informal activities and trips, and they're also there for the students for Shabbat and in a role model way. And then the Clappers are here in Rabbi Shemesh, and that's very important for them to be able to come and have Shabbat experience in a community. At Israel XP, we love Shabbat. We never want students to feel like they don't have something to do. So besides Pesach, the dorms are always open. If we have Shabbatons, we have many Shabbatons all over. We go to Jerusalem, Tzfat, Tveria. We do Shabbatons on kibbutz, things like that. But if it's an off Shabbat, they can always stay in the dorms and be hosted by those families, or they can come to one of our homes. There's other families that we work with in the Gush and Nofai Alon and Givat Ze'ev that are happy to host them for Shabbats. And we always want the students to feel like they have an opportunity to plug in. Look, there's so many distractions in the world, and it's hard. It's hard to make that leap and say, I don't want my phone on Shabbat. Like, I'm not flicking on the lights on Shabbat. But once you go all in, Israel's the place to go all in because it's magical here, obviously. And once you go all in, you're going to see that you can't live and be successful the other 6 days of the week to your fullest extent without that day of Shabbat and plugging into yourself and plugging into Torah. So we want to give them as many opportunities to feel that while they're here as possible. And hopefully that will carry on with them after their year. So those are the 2 biggest pieces. So students learn every morning. They have Torah subjects. They learn in the Midrashah. The girls learn in the Midrashah at Bar Ilan University, and the boys learn in the Kollel at Bar Ilan. So that's their formal Jewish growth. And then there's a lot of informal opportunities on top of that. In terms of Jewish connection to the land, we have trips every other Sunday around the land of Israel, hiking, advocacy, museums, volunteering, and we do a big long trip in the fall to the Negev and a big long trip in the spring up north. So they really get a chance to connect with the land of Israel and Jewish leadership. So every student picks some kind of leadership opportunity. We have an option to learn Magen David Adom and get certified to go out on ambulances as first responders. We have a lot of chesed volunteering options. This year in particular, there's a tremendous amount of students that are volunteering at Tel Shemer Hospital, which is right next to the dorms. It's the largest hospital in Israel. It's also the military hospital. So we have students going on a daily basis, taking care of soldiers and their families. But we also have volunteering opportunities at Save a Child's Heart and the animal shelter and all sorts of other stuff. Students can do internships in biotechnology, nanotechnology, psychology, things like that. So everybody picks at least one kind of extracurricular activity that they're committed to. And really our hope is that they'll see their growth in terms of their Jewish identity as something that they can balance and integrate into all the other pieces of their life. And that whatever growth they achieve during their year in Israel is something that not only they can hang on to, but they can continue to increase in wherever they're going next. And of course, the social element, hopefully a group of your best friends for the rest of your life.
I have a bunch of friends that went to Israel XP and had awesome experiences over the years. And just, I want to like backtrack a little bit. Like, you have an awesome program, but when you're going to get these students to come to your program, like, what in your mind would you say is like a kid that is meant for Israel XP? Like, if there's a kid in America that's like, okay, should I be going to yeshiva and seminary? Maybe should I go in Israel XP? Like, what's the type of person or the type of kid that you're looking for?
Good question. I mean, it's not a one size fits all, but I think it's an important question.
We will be right back to today's episode with Rabbi Rebbetzin Menaged. But first, I want to give a shout out to a company that I actually created, which is the sponsor of this video, and that is Noble Custom Suits. I started a company a year ago with a friend of mine in New York named Aaron Tuckman. I run the branch here in Eretz Yisrael, and what we do is go to your house or office or wherever you want us to show up, and we spend an hour with you designing a custom suit from scratch for your next family simcha or any special event that you want to have a nice looking suit for. So if you want to learn more about Noble Custom Suits, check out noblecustomsuits.com, as you guys could see here on the screen. And without further ado, it's time to get right back to our episode with Rabbi Rebbetzin Menaged.
Do you want to talk?
Okay, so at Israel XP, we always say that we're not trying to compete with yeshivas and seminaries. If somebody is willing to learn Torah full time, go for it. It's awesome. You're in Gan Eden. The Torah is sweeter than honey. So go learn the Torah. But for our students, they say the full time learning. I say on the guy's side, they're always like, learning Gemara full time. That's not what they're looking for, and they're not going to be going to Eretz Yisrael for that. That's not part of their agenda. But they still like Torah. They still like Hashem. They also might still want their college classes. And we have a nice range of students, some that are more academic oriented, some that are more trip oriented. So they have a lot of things they might want out of life, but the full-time learning is not what they're looking for. But if you give them an opportunity to do a lot, to really experience Israel and experience Torah, they're willing to take it up on that. And because we have the college perspective as well, what is there to lose? And that's the biggest thing. Like, okay, you got to start your college career. So come to us. We'll give you a full year of freshman credits, and then have your gap year experience, have your yeshiva experience, have your trip experience, have your volunteer experience, and you get to do it all.
Wow.
We draw students from a range of different kinds of communities. So there might be the NCSY student who has been really inspired and motivated, but to get to yeshiva or seminary might be too big of a stretch, either for them or their parents, and they had that plan of university.
I have a bunch of friends that went to Israel XP and had awesome experiences over the years. And just, I want to like backtrack a little bit. Like, you have an awesome program, but when you're going to get these students to come to your program, like, what in your mind would you say is like a kid that is meant for Israel XP? Like, if there's a kid in America that's like, okay, should I be going to yeshiva and seminary? Maybe should I go in Israel XP? Like, what's the type of person or the type of kid that you're looking for?
Good question. I mean, it's not a one size fits all, but I think it's an important question. Do you want to talk?
Okay, so at Israel XP, we always say that we're not trying to compete with yeshivas and seminaries. If somebody is willing to learn Torah full time, go for it. It's awesome. You're in Gan Eden. The Torah is sweeter than honey. So go learn the Torah. But for our students, they say the full time learning. I say on the guy's side, they're always like, learning Gemara full time. That's not what they're looking for, and they're not going to be going to Eretz Yisrael for that. That's not part of their agenda. But they still like Torah. They still like Hashem. They also might still want their college classes. And we have a nice range of students, some that are more academic oriented, some that are more trip oriented. So they have a lot of things they might want out of life, but the full-time learning is not what they're looking for. But if you give them an opportunity to do a lot, to really experience Israel and experience Torah, they're willing to take it up on that. And because we have the college perspective as well, what is there to lose? And that's the biggest thing. Like, okay, you got to start your college career. So come to us. We'll give you a full year of freshman credits, and then have your gap year experience, have your yeshiva experience, have your trip experience, have your volunteer experience, and you get to do it all.
Wow.
We draw students from a range of different kinds of communities. So there might be the NCSY student who has been really inspired and motivated, but to get to yeshiva or seminary might be too big of a stretch, either for them or their parents. And they had that plan of university. So we're something that works for everybody. So that's one kind of student we get. We get students from the modern Orthodox Jewish day schools, but I would say even in those schools, as we see that they're growing, there's really a range. And there's a large percentage of those students that yeshiva and seminary are for sure the best option for. And their affiliation is at a level that is my team for yeshiva or seminary. But you have kind of religiously speaking, on the margins, though they're certainly not marginal individuals or marginal to us, what we call more under-affiliated Jews. People who, when they go to shul, it's a modern Orthodox shul, they want modern Orthodox day school education, but their level of affiliation is not necessarily really strong. And those people, I think it's very important that there's ways to keep them solidly within the Orthodox tent, and give them a path where they can get stronger, and also that they know that they're part of that community, part of the Torah community.
Right. And I would say that the model that we have at Israel XP is that with the no pressure, grow at your own pace, but you have a pace. So particularly for those the under-affiliated Orthodox students, where they affiliate with the Orthodox community somewhat, but to now say, okay, now you got to go into this box right now. The box, they were somewhat in the box, somewhat not in the box. So that's why the whole approach by us is, okay, no pressure. We're going to come. We're going to give you a lot of opportunity to learn. So along with the formal education in the morning that everybody goes to, there's also the informal. There's a lot of Torah happening every single night of the week at our program. And then the idea is no pressure. Come out. We're going to have a lot of great food. We have wings and wisdom. We have soup in the scoop. We're going to get you out with a lot of good stuff, incentives. And then they're choosing to come on their own. And then they feel good about it. And they come out there and they're like, wow. And then just thinking much more long-term, by the end of the year, they've now made it as part of their daily life to choose to go and pick Torah. Now, wherever they're going to be next year, those that got a lot stronger, they want to stay in Israel, they want to do a shana bed, they want to make aliyah, they want to join the army. Those that say we want to switch to YU, okay, they're going to really be in a but they're going to go back into that bubble much stronger. But the average student who's going to go back to a regular secular university, they've now already had their freshman year in Israel where they've chosen Torah on their own and liked it. So now when they go back to their college campuses, I am hearing nonstop from the campus rabbis on there, whether it's the JLIC rabbis, whether it's the Chabad houses that we actually have a full-time alumni staff who's in contact with, they're telling us, yeah, your students are some of the biggest leaders on campus because they've already made it part of their daily life on campus.
I would say, my understanding was that modern Orthodoxy was a system where an individual balances elements of modernity within the framework of their Orthodoxy. That's not necessarily what it means for everybody. It's not even necessarily how it's taught these days. And for many people, it means I'm modern and my rabbis are Orthodox. And that paradigm was actually put to us by Rabbi Ari Khan, who oversees the academic and the Torah learning at Bar Ilan University, is a huge mentor and role model for us. And we want to help students move from sort of the second thing to the first thing. And that's a big goal for us too.
Wow. Okay. So, I want to touch on one little point that you guys mentioned a second ago, that like when your students go from Israel XP back to America and, you're hearing from all these JLIC rabbis that they are some of the biggest leaders on campus. Like, what would you say from all the years of doing this that you guys have been able to help students within Israel to now be able to go back to a secular university? And, look at the world today, like, especially after October 7th, like it is crazy what's going on with anti-Semitism and stuff like that. So kind of like, what have you guys been able to do while students are in Israel to help mold them with only about 8 months that you guys have to do that to help propel them?
So first of all, something that was really important to us was a vision for us, and we got really fortunate that we've been able to do, is to appoint an alumni coordinator whose main job is, while the students are here, to serve as a mashgiach ruchani and connect to them, and also help them think about what life is going to look like after XP and stay in touch with them. And we were really fortunate because Rabbi Yitzhak Clapper was an Avite for several years in the dorms after us, and also lives here now in Ramat Beit Shemesh, really was willing to step into that role and has done a tremendous job. And so we want to know, we want to help each student chart the course of where they're planning to go next. Maybe help them if that is undefined. Not everybody knows when they come on their gap year where they're going next. So helping them choose between some good decisions is also invaluable. And then setting them up with a plan wherever they're going. How are they going to keep learning? Right? Who are they living with? How close are they living to the place where they're going to be for Shabbat? All these kinds of issues are really important. When's your next trip back to Israel? So he's working with them on an individual level and staying in touch with them, so they know that they're part of the XP family forever. And also, again, so that they feel that the Torah community always has a place for them. It always has a component that is for them. So that's one big piece for us. That's really important. And the second piece, I think, is trying to build leadership skills. something that was really important for me was that, and maybe I came at it backwards, was to understand that being a leader for a Jewish cause also makes you a role model and a representative of the Jewish people, whether you ask for it or not. But also that you can be really activated. And when you're really activated, you can learn a lot and absorb a lot. It's one thing to sit in a classroom and get information. It's another thing to have to now transmit that information to somebody else or do the actions that you're taught. And you learn a lot by doing. And also then you contribute a lot to the Jewish people. So a big maxim for me that my husband taught me in Pirkei Avot was B'makom she'ein anashim hishtadel liot ish. To learn to stand up when you see a gap or you see something that needs to be done. And that formulated a lot for me of my identity, but I think for each of these students, and it ties into the fact that they may feel a little bit under-affiliated. Well, give yourself a role. See something that you want to be done better, or see a way that you feel like you can connect better and do it. So let's start doing that now while you're here in Israel, and let's think about where you're going next and what infrastructure exists for you, but also what infrastructure you can build and how you can be a Jewish leader.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't help but think, but like when your students now go from Israel XP to a campus and you mold them and you prepare them for all that is going to come, I mean, yes, you guys are not the coordinator that's, in touch with all the alumni and whatnot, but I'm sure you have some form of a kesher with different alumni that come. But like, what have you heard specifically, let's say after, October 7th happened in Israel of what is going on and like, take me through that if you have anything potentially share.
As we know, there's many challenges for trying to transition to a secular college campus in terms of what you're going to do with your own Torah learning and your own mitzvah observance. And now you have, obviously, post Simchas Torah, you have a whole other set of obstacles that you face. Forget about trying to stand up and be a pro-Israel advocate, just in terms of comfort with your Jewish identity and wearing a kippah or wearing a Magen David on campus. Our current students that are here, a lot of them went to Europe on their semester break, and they told us how much they had to take off those items or wear baseball caps and hide their Jewish identity wherever they were going in Europe. And I think it would have been a different conversation last semester break. So, and that pales in comparison to the challenges that our students are facing at some of the Ivy League institutions. We have a student, an alum from Parental, that went testifying on Capitol Hill about her experiences. We have another alum who's now the student body president at UC Santa Barbara, who's had her offices defaced and threats made against her. And first of all, they're heroes. Our students are heroes for standing up, and the challenges that they're facing are literally life-threatening. Forget about soul-threatening. There's physical harm. In some ways, though, it is reminiscent for me of the things that we went through a few decades ago with campus activism during the Second Intifada, and things that maybe have quieted down, at least on American college campuses, but they hadn't gone away. And the networks that were being built of, the fusion between anti-Semitic ideas and popular political movements have now come back together and sort of roared in full force against our students, and they've really been caught in a system that they didn't create, that they don't quite understand, and it's really overwhelming.
Right, but I do think, though, in this modern version of what's going on campuses today, Jewish identity as well as anti-Israel have become the same exact conversation. So
correct. In advocacy 20 years ago, we used to distinguish between anti-Israel propaganda or criticism of Israel versus anti-Semitism. And we talked a lot about finding the line between them. Now, unfortunately, they've merged so tightly together in the experience of the average Jew in America that, it's scary. Scary.
Right. But at the same time, it's opportunity, because now part of standing up for Israel is also saying, I'm also Shomer Shabbat on campus. And you're reading it in the articles when she mentioned our alum, that's the student body president, who's also Shomer Shabbat on campus. That's part of the articles as well, and in the secular press as well, because to be proud of your Jewish identity and step it up and be that hero and not be scared, even though people are literally threatening you, it's very empowering, and it's very empowering for other Jews across other college campuses. We talked about the students going to Europe feeling that they maybe had to hide the Magen David, take off the kippah, put a hat on. But what I've been hearing from on college campuses, that the amount of students that are asking to put mezuzahs on their dorm rooms is gone up now on college campuses, because we get that we're under attack, but we're going to step it up because we're still proud and we're not going to go away.
Yeah, that's true. There's a shortage of mezuzahs for students that want them on their college door frames, and I don't know if you heard, there was a story recently that there was a panel on this at Harvard, and the panel fell on Tanit Esther, and they had meals for Muslim students that were attending, post Ramadan meals packaged to go, but the Jewish students said, hey, we want packaged meals for the end of Tanit Esther also. We want our Jewish identity to be recognized, and this is different than something a few decades ago, and I think it is a huge opportunity for an awakening of Jewish identity, and I think we've seen it in the kind of applicants that are applying for the future. We've heard it from our alumni. And again, I think it comes back to instilling within our alumni that sense of responsibility wherever they are to bring in more Jews, and to strengthen by connecting others.
Well, I mean, what would you guys say from these students that are, there on the front lines? What are some like traits or like midas or things that like people have within them to be like front line of the battle on like a secular college campus?
So everybody has their role to play, and I don't want to not everybody's built for answering the tough questions or having the debates. So everybody should find a way. One of the most important people for me when I was out there front and center at the University of Florida was a person that came along and offered to build me a website, and was never going to be the kind of guy that was out there answering those questions. And he just found his talent. Turned out he wound up becoming a rabbi and coming to work with us too, many years later. But you should find what it is that you're good at and find a way to channel it.
And I'm sure there's certain students that are on a secular college campus right now, and probably a lot of your alumni that might listen to this. And, there's a lot of times when you come across these Israel conversations on these secular college campuses, from the side that is not necessarily arguing towards Israel, there's a lot that is being said that doesn't always make so much sense. And sometimes that side of somebody arguing against you is there just to, stick it to you a little bit and sometimes get a reaction out of you. So what would you say is your advice to, let's say, somebody of like, okay, you're on the front lines, you're there to argue for Israel or make the case for Israel, and you have somebody that's coming from an angle where like they're not doing it from any place of like tov, and sometimes they're there just to get you riled up. So what's your advice of like, you don't need to respond to that, this is something you should try to engage in? Like, what would you say to somebody?
They're not your audience. Your audience is anybody that's in the middle who doesn't have a strongly formulated opinion, and you can engage. That's it.
Wow. Right. And I'd say even your conversation with those is really for the listeners. When they do engage you, when they are coming up to your table and they are starting to like, all this anti-Israel propaganda, talking to them is a waste of time, but talking to them could be good with all the other people surrounding you listening to the conversation.
Right. You just keep communicating the messages that which is that Israel wants peace and really is lacking a partner for peace, and terrorism is the obstacle to peace. You can talk about Israeli values. You can talk about Israeli democracy. You can talk about cultural diversity and innovation here. You can talk about whatever you want about Israel. You really have to focus on the people who don't have a strongly formulated opinion. Nowadays, you are going to probably be required to counter some of the stories that are in the news. So I think staying up to date with the news and understanding how to counter bias is important. But not everybody's expected to know everything. Now, one huge advantage is if you spend the year here in Israel, no matter what program you're on, you have firsthand experience, and you have to take that information and what you've seen with your own eyes and be able to apply it. For instance, our students our students are at Bar Ilan University. Like I said, there's over 20,000 students there. Thousands of those students are Muslim, visibly so. And why? Because 20% of Israel are Arab Muslims, and they have the same rights to education. They have the same ambitions as the Jewish population of Israel. So I want a student that came on XP to be able to communicate to somebody in the middle of America that they went to college for the year in Israel with a bunch of non-Jews, with a bunch of Muslims. That's important, and that's just speaking from experience. And I think this is true to all the students that go to seminaries and yeshivas also and wind up in these places. When you go to the borders of Israel, and then you understand the threats that Israel is under, you should be able to communicate that. When you go from the hills of Jerusalem and down to the coastal plain of Tel Aviv, you should be able to communicate that if Israel doesn't have a military strategic advantage on the hills, we can't protect the airport, we can't protect the population of Tel Aviv. So those are things that you don't have to be an expert on history or politics or geography to know. They're just things that you saw with your own eyes.
From people that are on the front lines, right? And they are the ones that are, call it, arguing or making a case for Israel. Like, there are clearly people that are not qualified to do this, right? And you don't know if you are that person. Like, give me your opinion, your thoughts on that a little bit, and kind of take me through what you think.
I think if you feel like you have the energy and the motivation to do it, that you're responsible to become as educated as possible. And that's not just information. It's also learning about public speaking, learning about diplomacy, learning how to answer tough questions in a way that resonates with your audience, and that you should hone those skills because we need as many ambassadors as we can get. We're a small people. We're a small people up against a large enemy, not just physically, but out there in social media world. And if you feel ready to do it, so you're required. And I think it should be a tenet of Jewish education from an early age. I speak a lot with NCSY groups, high school groups that come in the summer. And one of the things I do is try to get them a little riled up by exposing them to some arguments against Israel that maybe this is the first time they're going to be hearing in person, because I want them already from the age of 15 or 16 to say, hey, I need to get more educated, so that by the time they hear this at 20, they've had years of reading and years of thinking about it and years of listening, and that they can be good leaders. Some of the biggest challenges for Israel come not in the quad, but they come in the classroom. Professors have an enormous amount of power. You know that anybody in a position of responsibility automatically has a lot of power and influence over people, and that can really be a place that students need to be prepared. They cannot necessarily win against an anti-Israel professor, but not being prepared for the possibility that's going to happen can have tremendous damage for their perceptions of Israel and for their Jewish identity and their self-esteem.
So I just want to touch on that little Nakuda for a second, that like when these students come to Israel XP, it's not a typical yeshiva and seminary experience, and it is a co-environment and whatnot. But what would you guys say is your key to success of what you do to help these students grow in a ruchniistic way and just like spiritually and just overall as a Jewish person?
Yeah. Look, I think just the feeling that they should be able to grow and they should own their growth, and that they should have role models, a range of role models. And this is an important period in their life where they're maturing. Their cerebral cortexes are fusing, hopefully starting to fuse shut, and they're making big decisions about who they want to be. And the more that we can surround them with positive energy, positive role models, Torah ideals, the more likely we are that they're going to want to adopt those. But we're very open. We want students to really grow into the best version of themselves. So we don't have a one-size-fits-all idea of what that looks like for them.
Right. We really want them. We really want them to love Judaism, and we're going to show them that Torah is awesome, Judaism is awesome, Halacha is awesome. So we want to give them that opportunity with extra learning, with one-on-one, just to be there, just experience and see it firsthand. But at the same time, we want them to make that choice themselves. So that's what we're saying. We're no pressure. Come out. It's awesome. The food's good too. But you're making that choice, and then it's really real.
Oh yeah, I don't know if this can be woven back in before when we were talking about learning. So in their formal learning, they learn Halacha, they learn Parsha, they learn Pirkei Avot, they learn contemporary topics in Torah. And then at night, we have informal classes. We have a Beit Midrash night, one night a week. We bring in different speakers on various contemporary Torah topics. We Tish on Thursdays. So there's Torah opportunities at every step of the way. But a lot of time they want more. So every afternoon for students that don't have their secular classes, we're available. We teach classes every afternoon just on topics that students want, right? So what are you teaching right now?
Right, so right now we're getting closer to Pesach. So we have one group that wants to learn Haggadah Be'iyun. We have another group that wants to learn bigger themes of Pesach. We have a side Chabur that's just doing Yichud Shabbat. That's not on their official class time. Right. It's like students who want to learn.
And I'm doing Rambam, Hilchot Tshuva with a group that asks, and then I'm learning Hilchot Tzniut with somebody else. And the students they're hungry for it. They want it.
Right. And then this is all the staff, meaning the whole staff is doing this. You know, we have our set schedules. We have our set extra learning, but then we have more than one-on-ones, and we want to give that opportunity to the student as well.
You know, I want to end off with one other question before I get to my final one about this, is that, you know, I was having a conversation with a high school kid actually recently. I don't know if he's going to be listening to this one, but for let's say somebody that's listening to this right now, whether they are a parent of a student that is a senior in high school, or they are an actual senior in high school that is on the verge, they're like, am I going to Israel or am I not going to Israel? Or do I go to secular college? I don't need Israel. What would you say to that person right now that might be listening to this right now?
Nobody ever regrets doing a year in Israel. And don't think of it as a gap year. Think of it as a growth year. It's a real opportunity to take whatever you're going to do in the long term and bring it to the next level.
Then there's the first year of going away from home to put them in an environment where they're beginning to feel that independence on a university, but at the same time have families that are taking care of them, that are waking up on them, that are watching over them. You actually have that middle ground right now to prepare them to actually go off on their own to a second university.
Awesome. And I first of all, I found it fascinating, all the stuff that you guys shared. And the one question that I like to end off with every episode, I don't know if you've seen this discussion before, but shout out to my wife, Yali, for this one, even though she's not here right now. But for all the students that you've come across over the years and all the people in your shul from years and years ago, if you had one message, both of you, that was like, this is your message in a bottle, take it with you wherever you go, it could be about anything, what would that be?
No, I really go back to that principle of standing up and doing, and finding the way to make a difference and realize that you're part of Klal Yisrael, your impact matters, but also that you'll ultimately strengthen your own level of connection and commitment by living it.
Yeah, and then I would say Torah. It's learning Torah. You have to find that time. So as you're doing, step it up. Do big things for Klal Yisrael. You know, we only have 120 years here. We got a lot of stuff to do, but we also have that Torah. We have the teaching of Torah. We have our personal Torah. We have to find it. And as you get older, take anything that you like. You like Gemara, you like Halacha, you like Parasha. Just learn some Torah. Connect to Hashem's wisdom every single day.
Wow. And I could not agree more to those sentiments, and just really thank you guys so much for taking the time, and this conversation was very eye-opening to me in many regards, and I hope people took a little bit of chizuk from this, and just thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode with Rabbi Rebbetzin Menaged. I really hope you guys enjoy. If you are a new listener to the podcast, please feel free to give us a like, subscribe on YouTube, or follow us on Spotify, and share this with a friend. We're really trying to get this podcast out there and really give people a better understanding of all the amazing people here in Israel. So thank you guys so much for watching today, and I look forward to seeing you guys in next week's episode.